welcome to Playwright, a podcast about creating and sharing new ways to play. My name is Ryan Hamann. You can call me H, and it is very, very hot where I am. How is it down in San Francisco?
Very pleasant. Very, very pleasant.
Very pleasant?
Yeah, I mean, I'm even further south from San Francisco where they have summer. Is what we call this season. But yeah, I guess San Francisco's been pretty nice lately.
You are Ryan Quintal.
Oh yeah, sorry. Hi,
familiar
everybody.
now to anyone who listens to the Game Scoop podcast from IGN as kind of a going away present. That's probably not the best way to present it.
It kind of was.
You are a capable podcast guest and host. They brought in you as guest talent. Not as a present, not as a favor. But yeah, you were on a recent episode. I just listened to it today. I was very, very excited to hear and see you on YouTube in the proverbial seat.
If you ever want to ruin one of your favorite shows, be on it, and then you can't really listen to it without being like, "Oh, I had this conversation yesterday. I don't need to hear it again."
That's what I did for Kanan Reigns for about 3.5 years, so I understand the.
Ooh, that's a long time. And hey, you know what? H, there's somebody, by the way, I'm Ryan Quintal. You can call me Q. We have a third person in the virtual studio today.
Third person, just like the Uncharted games. Incredible.
That's right.
Really
you were the
first
person. I'm the second person. And
right, the second person vastly underrepresented in video games.
Not enough second person games. We should pitch those on this show.
Definitely.
And our third person, Mr. Tom Marks.
Hello.
Hi, sir.
How are you? I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Let's give, if there are Game Scoop listeners, they probably already know you, but who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, I'm the PC editor at IGN, so I've been on Game Scoop a handful of times, not a ton of times, but...
So you just make sure that everything is very politically correct?
Yes.
That's basically the...
You know, I worked at PC Gamer for 3 years before I came to IGN, and I heard that joke quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry.
No. It's not an admonishment. It's just...
You must have had to say, I'm at PC Gamer, not like I'm a PC Gamer.
Right, yeah.
Tom, you have been at IGN now for what, a little over a year, maybe about a year?
A year on July 24th. So
my goodness.
Very close to a year.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. So you're probably celebrating your anniversary by the time people are listening to this. So
yeah, just about.
It's been wonderful working with you. Now, we are sort of here today to pitch each other video game ideas, and I understand you already have one on deck. So are you feeling good about it this week? Are you ready?
I'm feeling good. Yeah, this is it's an idea I've had for a while, although maybe the public opinion on might have soured since I came up with it. But that will remain to be seen.
What is Donald Trump Simulator 2018? It's a fun game about hosting a game show that I'm sure is going to age wonderfully.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe it hasn't aged that badly, but
fair enough.
Anyways, yeah, that's basically the premise of the show is that we each pitch brand new video games every single week. We come up with a oftentimes wacky and not grounded in what could possibly be created in the realistic video game space idea, and then we workshop it for 10 minutes, and we come away with something that either fully realizes the vision that we came in with or is completely different and equally as good. So Ryan Quintal, Q, why don't you kick us off with one of your video game ideas?
Well, in my mind meld a couple weeks ago of thinking about the Pokemon MOBA, I'm going big budget and pulling in great franchises for my game pitches this summer.
Okay.
I am pitching this week a Robocop video game in the style of the sort of Arkham City Shadow of War type games.
Ooh.
Uh-huh.
Where you get to play as Robocop, maybe you have a cool like VAT style targeting system, and you're taking down the Delta City crime syndicate, and so these people are constantly springing up. But I figured we could make it kind of like a little bit more Robocop, slower, a little more Soulsian in terms of the combat, and actually make it so that as you kind of defeat enemies and move around the world, you're getting upgrades, but those parts can be destroyed or blown off Robocop, and when you die, you have to kind of deal with your lesser parts and get back to where you were and recover your Robocop suit parts to get back on the force. So there's a lot more that we can tack onto that, but let's start there and we'll see where it goes.
We're giving ourselves 10 minutes. We'll start the clock there. So I think one of the interesting choices in wording that you made was that you have to deal with your parts that have been blown off your body. When I hear deal with, I think like this is like an enemy that has to be dealt with or something. And so, that's kind of an interesting move. There was a game a while back called Shadows of the Damned. I think it was a Suda51 game back on the Xbox 360 and PS3. And when you died, we've referenced this game in the past on Playwright, and so it's not an entirely new thing, but when you die, I think your body gets blown apart and you are just your head like rolling around to like rejoin the pieces of your body. If I remember this all correctly, I could be entirely mixing it up with other games. I like this idea of each of your body parts having some level of autonomy, especially if you're a robot police officer.
So are you pitching something akin to like the Evil Dead 2 Ash Hand of Robocop?
Yeah,
part?
exactly, right.
I was picturing like the end of Iron Giant.
Oh.
All the parts crawling towards the body or whatever.
Yeah. To reassimilate these pieces into your body, they have to be like fought off like enemies, kind of like a Pickle Rick scenario,
That's perfect. That's one of the things that I thought was kind of cool that I encountered recently in Hollow Knight. I'm not very far into Hollow Knight, maybe just like an hour or two. Mm-hmm. But I came across my dead body and there was a very mean version of me that was interested in not dying.
Well, it takes that the kind of classic Souls trope of if you die, you drop everything you have on you, and then it, like you said, it makes that an enemy, similar to what you were talking about, which I think would be interesting if you made that instead of just like in Hollow Knight or in Dark Souls, where it's just your currency. If you actually made it upgrades or parts of you, that would be really, really interesting. If a specific part of you broke off, that part of you would have to be fought is a fun concept.
Yeah, I was thinking that like Robocop, after watching it this weekend, there's a lot of weird Robocop details that I didn't remember.
So did you watch it specifically because you're moving to Detroit?
Maybe. But I watched Robocop again because I was moving to Detroit and I had no idea whether my fiance was going to like it. And
it was that or 8 Mile.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad we went with Robocop. And I didn't remember this, but Robocop, I guess, also sustains himself on like baby food and paste of a sort, which I don't think you ever see him eat in the movies. But I liked the idea of you having to collect parts and then kind of go back to OCP or the police station. And while you're kind of under surgery or you're sort of upgrading your OS or whatever, that's when, like resting in Dark Souls by the fire, the world is becoming kind of re-hostilized or kind of growing back against you. So you're almost trying to go off and be Robocop for as sustained a stretch as you can before the world kind of like claws back in those regeneration phases.
So this is interesting because the general like Dark Souls approach is that every time you die, you respawn at the bonfire and every enemy is back. Even apart from a few, obviously there's exceptions, but for all intents and purposes, the world is reset. What you're pitching here is a really interesting spin on that you can choose to keep pressing on and the world doesn't respawn until you go back and fully regroup and fully reattain your power. And so if you die and you choose to, either respawn or keep pressing on as a lesser Robocop, then the challenges that you've already overcome stay defeated. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because there's so many times in RoboCop where he is just like badly damaged and fighting through those moments that I think make for an interesting storytelling mechanic of like, the real feeling of you're on your last leg, but the alternative of regrouping means you're going to inherently give up a bunch of ground. And so having to make that trade-off it seemed like it could be cool and fit RoboCop well.
So you also mentioned that you were thinking of this as like an Arkham style game. Does that mean very linear? Like, how are you imagining that?
I think that there would probably have to be some story where, you're getting upgrades at OCP. And of course, OCP turns out not to be the good guy like OCP does.
Spoilers. Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I also loved the idea of so much about the feeling of being Batman. I think that Arkham Knight broke a little bit once you had a tank. It was like, okay, I have a tank here. But the feeling of driving around in sort of a sort of beat up cop car as RoboCop would feel a little bit more like traversing the Arkham City. I guess Arkham City in terms of maybe format and traversal, and less so in like I'm fighting 10 bad guys at the same time, because, ultimately I think RoboCop would move and feel a little bit more like I don't know if you guys know the game, like the Surge, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, a little slower, a little plodding.
And the Surge is very Dark Soulsy.
Yeah, definitely. So now one of the things that you mentioned, another little contradiction that I want to point out in the original pitch, which I think could lead to some interesting ground, is you mentioned that kind of an Arkham Asylum, Arkham City style combat system, but also like a Fallout 3 style VATS system, which seems kind of diegetically opposed to one another. You have the very fluid, lock-on friendly style of combat of the Arkham games versus the, let's pause the action and let's take a moment to really hone in and focus on exactly where we want to shoot RPG style combat of the Fallout games. And so I was thinking of like, what are some ways to reconcile these two opposing points? And I was thinking maybe in the regular combat sequences, you do have the freedom, the fluidity of the Assassin's Creed, Arkham Asylum style of combat, but you could use your robot senses to slow time down and to really like hone in on one part of a criminal's body. And you can cripple them in certain ways. If you take out their leg, that would lessen their mobility options. You can take out their arms to make them drop weapons that they're holding, or to lessen the amount of damage that they're able to do to you. And I think that would make for a really interesting kind of ebb and flow of the pace of combat, and would probably keep it feeling a little bit fresher, since it's more of a tactical experience than the Arkham style games, which I love the combat in that, but it is all kind of the same pace all the way through.
Yeah, it's a little mashy too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be interested in exploring that a little bit more, because like in my mind, so I hate to keep referencing the movie, but there's a scene that it caught me unusual in terms of how RoboCop handles like multi-person encounters, which is he is like slowly one by one rotating his body and like picking off targets, but all that time in between, he's absorbing a lot of hits. He's absorbing a lot of bullet damage. And I think like if you make the choice of like having to react more quickly or be mobile and dodge those bullets, that might help you, say, prolong your life, prolong your run. But if you want to be like lethal as fast as possible, then it's going to be a matter of like going into that target system. I think there's a RoboCop TV show, or maybe it's in one of the movies, where they actually upgrade him to target 2 people at the same time, which is so hilarious when you think about like, a robot can only handle like targeting 1 person at a time.
That's interesting. So it's like a VAT system, except there's no slow-mo. You're really kind of sacrificing something to go into that extra powerful form, so to speak. You can target the individual body parts of the enemies, but you're not given a free shot, so to speak, like you do in VATS. It's a really quick way to enter and conclude a hostile standoff. Whereas in this one, you would have to plant your feet and just say, I'm going to absorb some damage, but it's going to be worth it.
Yeah, you can even imagine like it's starting off with very sort of like, your classic 80s action movie, like stupid thugs with like very low level weaponry and no armor. And then by the end of the game, you have sort of ED 209s patrolling the streets that Robocop somehow is almost like a guardian in Breath of the Wild, right? Where it's almost more worth it to run away than to directly encounter them, depending on where you're leveled.
Interesting. So we are out of time on that one. We've hit our 10 minutes. And so what we have to do now is come up with a name for this game.
I didn't come in with a name. I'm thinking probably something with Delta City in it or Detroit in it.
So there's Detroit Becoming Human would be...
We can't do that. What if, I mean, this is so generic, but whatever. This is a video game show. Robocop Delta City Underground.
Ooh.
Did you say Delta City Underground?
Yeah.
Okay.
I like it.
Not bad.
It sounds a little bit like a racing game, but we'll get past it.
They got to put the underglow on Robocop.
Yeah, that's right.
Get him souped up for the streets.
Yeah, Robocop should... Oh, man. Okay. He should feel like the car from the Mad Max game. That's all I'm going to say. All right.
Yeah, I'm into that. All right, so right now, it is up to our guest, Tom. What kind of a game do you come in with today? And let's find a way to deconstruct and destroy it.
So this is kind of what I meant by it maybe aging. I can pitch this game really, really quickly, which is Diablo Battle Royale is the fundamental of it. And so basically it would be either one, but I was thinking probably it'd be more fun in a team because Diablo is always more fun in groups, and I think Battle Royale is more fun in groups too. But basically squads of people. It'd be like a top-down ARPG where a bunch of different squads of people go into a very large procedurally generated Diablo-style dungeon full of mobs, full of loot to find, full of equipment drops, all that normal stuff. Have to level up, assign skills. The leveling would be way, way faster. But then also, if you run into another group of people, fight or run away or whatever have you. And that kind of conflict is then the Battle Royale part of it. And as you go, like cave-ins come from outside or something like that, and you kind of get pushed into the center of the map. Or maybe even it's that you're trying to find something at the center of the map rather than, getting forced there by outside forces. And whoever finds this thing at the center or whoever is the last team standing then wins. And there are like a couple other games that have started to try to do this with like Battle Rights adding a Battle Royale mode. Dota added a very, very simple Battle Royale mode. But I really, really like the idea of huge, like a huge ARPG map and a lot of people on it with like leveling and the equipment that you would expect from Diablo and fighting mobs like you would expect from Diablo. Just it's a last man standing game mode.
All right, so we're starting the clock. So one of the things that I think about when I think about the Battle Royale genre of games is that they oftentimes take place within the third-person shooter or first-person shooter space because I think there's a certain level of like skill involved in performing kills in those types of games. You have a huge advantage if you just have a better weapon, but theoretically you could, even with your starter pickaxe in Fortnite, take somebody down if you adequately caught them by surprise, even if they had a much, much better weapon.
Right.
And so that's one of the things that I kind of worry about in a Diablo-style game where everything is very much based on what loot you find is that the winners and losers of a battle would be those who had just happened to find better armor, better weapons, just with higher numbers throughout the game because the battles are very much you stand in a room and you bash at each other. There's not a lot of a way to... at least in my experience with the genre, which I admit is very limited, there's not a lot of ways to kind of circumvent the numbers if you were to catch somebody else by surprise. But if I'm wrong, then please correct me. So I'm very curious to see how this would evolve into that space.
I don't think you're wrong in the context of Diablo games themselves. I think that there is a place, there are lots of places that top-down games like Diablo have proven that you can have a ton of mechanical skill in the combat with games like League of Legends or Dota or Battle Right, where you have, it's all about timing and counterplay and positioning where you're standing.
And knowing your cooldowns and such.
Knowing your cooldowns, knowing your opponent's cooldowns, all that sort of thing. And I think you're totally right that in the context of Diablo is very much just like a hack and slashy thing. But I think you could do a Diablo style game with that more engaged combat system of that you find in MOBAs. And it would still have a lot of mechanical skill, I think.
I mean, Diablo has like not only an insane amount of loot, but also like its versions of like Hood of the Wolf, Hood of the Rat, you know. I think if you pared that way down and had more of a Fortnite/PUBG manageable level of stuff to sort of equip and know.
Yeah.
And it dropped reliably from certain types of mobs rather, and like was more likely to get it from higher level enemies. Yeah, you could probably even out the gear. It's just almost more of a race to get that gear.
Part of that is definitely the scaling, right? Like you wouldn't be able to make a game like that scales the same way that Diablo does, because Diablo is expecting you to be leveling up and getting equipment across hours and hours of play. I think you would need to find a way, like you said, to pare that down and condense it into a quicker match size.
One of the things I really like about this genre being adapted into the battle royale space is that I feel like, and again, this is with very limited experience in the battle royale. I have such a hard time saying that today. Genre is that I feel like there's almost like an ideal loadout in battle royales where if you get a sniper rifle and you are a comfortably sniping player, then, you know, once you get your weapon that you want, you just kind of hunker down, and as long as the circle isn't closing in on you, then you're pretty much fine to just find a safe place and shoot all of your enemies. Whereas Diablo always has like a moving goalpost. You know, you have always something more to aim towards. And if you're not making forward progress, you can be assured that your enemies are. So, you know, it keeps things a little bit more mobile. It keeps things moving and unpredictable, and encounters happening frequently in ways that, you know, PUBG or Fortnite might not.
I like playing squad games in PUBG and Fortnite, but ultimately it's almost Destiny-like in it that basically everybody is capable of the same thing. And if you have weak or strong members of your team, that's very easy to predict the outcome of like how a team will do. But like there is no like healer class necessarily in PUBG, right? So the idea of being able to play a support character and, you know, keep a team, you know, healthy or buff during a combat encounter with another team almost takes on that MOBA feel. I also maybe want to adapt this, and I think it plays into the fiction well, Tom, which is, why don't you go Diablo 1 style, and every sort of layer of the dungeon is collapsing and you have to keep going further and further down, and every level deeper is more difficult mobs and a smaller play space. So you kind of have to continue to descend, and you're sort of forcing the flow that way.
You know, that's kind of interesting. If, let's say, this is built on multiple floors, and instead of the world getting smaller and forcing people into space that is already controlled by other people, it's just dumping people. The floor is giving out and dumping people into entirely new floors for everybody that just happen to be smaller. And so the space still continues to shrink, but, you know, it's not giving anyone an advantage just because they happen to be in the right place and they've already scoped out the area. Also, let's throw an additional challenge in there. I know that we talked about Diablo early on, but what if we set this in like a Willy Wonka chocolate factory where you have like candy forests and weird chocolate tunnels, and you could set traps for each other using some of the candy contraptions that seem very, very dangerous to be hosting groups of children in.
Wait, you're just describing the cow level. That's all you're.
Yeah, sure.
So are you talking like literally Willy Wonka? Like this is the challenges for these children who got to come to the chocolate factory?
Well, let's just say, if we're going to ground ourselves into, oftentimes having kind of like an aesthetic in mind can lead us into interesting places. And so I don't know if we want to negotiate for the rights of the official, Roald Dahl book, but, having some sort of a whimsy of fantastical locations in mind. And we can play on both the fantastical forests of candy and also the kind of industrial side of things that I feel like the movie, especially the Gene Wilder version, really plays on both of those really well.
So you start in like really magical, lovely areas full of candy, and then you descend into madness, and the lower floors are like
before you know you're dumping children into furnaces.
Yeah, really like the behind the curtain sort of stuff in the lower floors.
If you're going to do a fictional exploration too, I feel like Harry Potter at some point probably needs to be considered. Like that seems to me like Hogwarts is a place where you could uncover further and further levels of sort of weird portals and tunnels and stuff depending on where you go.
Well, Hogwarts is also just great for any sort of, or would be great for any sort of procedurally generated game, right?
Yeah.
Because
the shifting staircases and everything.
Staircases are shifting, and nobody's seen all of that school. Like there's tons of rooms and places that nobody has found ever and get lost to time. I feel like you could totally play that up, and you could even have special rooms where like you stumble upon the room of requirement in some section, and then it provides like whatever your lowest stat is, it levels up or something like that.
I'm into this, a Harry Potter battle royale. This is very cool.
I would like to figure out though, no matter what the fiction is, to maintain like one of the things that feels really fresh about this to me is having mobs and creeps or whatever you want to call them, having these NPCs be a wealth of experience like you might get in a MOBA, because I think that is one thing that could make Diablo feel different and special in this genre of like, hey, imagine the joy of finding a treasure goblin that's going to explode with a bunch of gear when you know you might need it to like defeat another team very quickly, and maybe two teams are chasing a treasure goblin. I've ruined the Harry Potter idea.
No. I think that there's room for that, right? Like I think that the Harry Potter lore has so much, so many different creatures and so many different weird things. I mean, they found a three-headed dog in a random room in that book, right? And they were like, 11 years old at that point. I think there's lots of room for that.
Yeah, I guess you could put like a Quidditch match level, and you could don't they go into like an ever shifting maze as well in one of those stories?
That's right. Yeah, that's the one with the Twilight Boy in it.
Mm-hmm.
We're really getting into the weeds here, and I like the direction that this is going, but we're out of time. We've hit our 10 minutes. So what we have to do now, this has shifted considerably from where it started. What we have to do now is name this Harry Potter themed action MOBA battle royale game, and see what kind of name we can come up with, just to kind of put a bow on this.
I'm gonna go with PotterUnknown's Triwizard Tournament.
Oh my god, it's like he's been on the show forever with that name.
Yeah, this is that's great. I like that a lot. What we're going to come in with now is a submission from the community. Every week we like to read something that our community members have written in. And if you, the community, would like to write in and suggest an idea for us to muse on for a little while, then you can email us, playwrightcast@gmail.com. You can go to our website, playwrightcast.com/pitch, or you can tweet us at playwrightcast. This comes from Alex Goodhand. This is Alex from Michigan, who says, "Loving the podcast so far, guys. I just listened to my first episode today. Keep up the great work. Inspiration like this is unique. Not everyone has a geeky friend they can spitball their ideas with, and I really appreciate that in the two of you. Thanks a ton." That's really nice.
Alex, I'm going to be so close to you in Michigan soon. We'll have to figure out how to get you to write in again.
Alex is writing in. He sent us a screenshot of an iPhone Note, which is a really great way to do that. He writes in, "A pixel RPG with turn-based combat where you play a bard looking to become a legendary storyteller. Most of the game has you as a background character, encouraging and joining heroes and chronicling their journey in song. During battle, you sing of their daring deeds to boost them in different ways. During nights at camp, you write new songs about your heroes, using the day's events for inspiration. The more daring you are, the better your song. Performing these songs in towns earns you a bit of cash, which you can then use to improve your instrument or even lend a bit to your pals so that they can buy better armor and weapons. And we'll start the clock there.
So I'm curious, does that mean that you'd only be controlling the bard? And you're basically just buffing these soldiers or these warriors in combat?
That's interesting. You know, there are a few RPGs where you can play as primarily a support class. Mm-hmm. I know that there's a few games where you play as like an item shop dealer. There's one of the Street Pass games on the Nintendo 3DS. Actually, you play a cook who serves up dishes to wandering heroes. And then you read in the newspaper the next day all of the great feats that they were able to overcome using the energy of the meals that you've prepared for them. And so, I feel like there's, at least in the best of RPGs, there's usually like an interesting support class, one of the members of your team. And that's kind of balanced out by having the more kind of immediately engaging combat class and magic class and healing class and stuff like that you'd usually expect. And so I'm very curious to see how we can make the only controllable character being the support class into an interesting game. And I'm sure we can get there.
I mean, my mind goes to putting all of the plastic instruments sitting around from the Rock Band days to work here. Like, I want to see, I want to see, a little, sort of lyrical map at the top that you're trying to hit those notes, and those are determining how good of a benefit or buff that you're giving your team. And maybe even, like, he talks about composing the song at the end of the day's events. Maybe like to control, because you have to control that data set in some way in order for the game to like be able to assemble the song. So maybe you have like a Soulsian weird notation lyrical thing where you're filling in, beware, fatties ahead, that sort of thing.
I think there's something to that because there's a few games I want to reference here, just kind of spitballing. In The Secret of Monkey Island, there is an activity called insult sword fighting, where you're having these sword duels with somebody else, but instead of besting them in your sword play, you best them in the insults that you're able to give them or the retorts to their insults that they're throwing at you, which you learn over time. There's also, I want to reference Kentucky Route Zero, which is an interesting, again, a point-and-click adventure game. In one of the episodes, you are kind of filling in lyrics to a song that is being sung in a live environment, and there's no real failure condition there. But what if you have to kind of balance these two things where in every battle, you can only draw upon the verbs, lines that are written about previous feats that these heroes have accomplished. They're kind of scored in such a way that the more heroic the deed, the more points that you get, which is essentially the more encouraged your heroes become to fight better. And then you also have to kind of balance in the lines rhyming with each other or having a dramatic arc or something. And so, you have to kind of sacrifice and balance all of these different things that could lead to a better scoring line until you're eventually kind of composing these really intricate poems written composed of different lines that you've learned just based on your adventures on the fly as needed.
I really like that. And the other thing that came to mind when you were first reading the pitch that I think would be maybe a subtle change to what he's talking about, but maybe also a significant one in at least the presentation, is I imagined it as kind of almost like a Paper Mario style of not in art style, but in Paper Mario was all done on a stage. Like every combat is on a stage with an audience and it's all a performance, right? And they're not, it's all a storybook. They're not actually in the lore of it, doing these things in real time, this has all happened already, and this is them retelling what happened. And I really like the idea that maybe that's what's going on here, where it's not that you're singing to encourage, but like maybe you're you're singing the story of what happened previously. And that doesn't really change the mechanics at all, because maybe you're still coming up with these songs on the fly, and you're still putting these things together. And when you sing a song that, or do an attack that, or sing a thing that would encourage your ally, instead of in the context of the game encouraging your ally, you're just saying, and then they got a rush of vigor, and then that happens, right? So it's you're saying, you're telling the story as you remember it happening, and then it just happens in front of you.
Oh man, so it's almost like using as sort of turnstile RPG mechanics to select into these lyrical lines.
Mm-hmm.
What have you like added on top of that? When you pick certain lines, you then should have to like follow it up with something that rhymes or has the correct beat pattern.
Yeah.
So like by selecting one thing in a moment because you know it's the right move for the character on stage and you're composing the song, well, the next thing is going to have to rhyme with it. So maybe it's the second move that you're actually interested in executing.
Interesting. So one of the things that I want to challenge here is that if you are a bard that is accompanying adventurers, then you are coming from a place of weakness, speaking these words of power into a much more powerful scenario. Whereas if you are a playwright, to use the name of the podcast, that is retelling a story, then you're kind of coming from a place of privilege and power, of being removed from the danger and being recalling it. You know, as they say, the history is written by the victors. And so presumably, you know, you've already been through these situations, you've already won, you've already come out victorious. Otherwise, they wouldn't have a story written about them. And so, you know, what is the dramatic hook that would make people nervous about, you know, being in a place where you are confident that the hero is going to come out ahead?
I don't know. Have either of you guys read Name of the Wind, the Patrick Rothfuss book? It's about, like, the main character of that book is basically a bard learning magic. And there's this really powerful scene in the book where he's playing this song and singing this song, telling this tale that is so emotional and so gut-wrenching and so stressful, basically, as he's telling the story of these two lovers, that everybody in the entire bar as he's singing it is just in tears, completely overtaken by this. And I feel like that would be part of it, is that a good storyteller is able to get people invested even if they know the ending, right? Like even if you know these heroes live, or maybe not all of them live, like maybe not all the stories are happy ones.
Right. Presumably many bards know the end of their tales as they're telling them.
Right. And to tell a tale that's just like, hey, they made it out alive and everything went well, but, you know, some stuff happened along the way, isn't nearly as compelling as trying to hook an audience along and make it a good story and make it a good fight, basically, for the viewers. Oh, man. So if you actually, because so many times an RPG, right, especially in a typical encounter, is about getting from A, the beginning of the fight, to B, defeating the enemy completely. What if you had to choreograph and construct the fights through the song to be more dramatic? Like, and the more dramatic you could make it, the closer you could bring the characters to near death, or the tide shifting that you could maneuver of, like, let's get them to be winning, then the bad guy to be winning, and how back and forth you can go is actually the goal of what makes you the money that I like here the sort of end thought from Alex is you can lend the money to your pals so they can buy better armor and weapons. What kind of deadbeats are you traveling?
So this is interesting. I'm going to present another challenge here. If you are a bard traveling with a group of heroes, then the success of the heroes, there's a certain continuity to that. From battle to battle, you are traveling with the same group of people, and their success being contingent upon you is kind of an interesting gauge of success of the previous fights that you've been in. Whereas if you are speaking to crowds, then presumably the measure of success is you winning them over and you telling a good story and you giving them an exciting emotional experience at the theater or at the pub or whatever, and that's cool. But what I don't get is that there's a discontinuity in between the longevity of the game. You're not presumably not speaking to the same crowd every time. You're traveling from town to town, or even the people who come to the same pub every night are going to be different folks. And so I'm curious how one night, one day carries into the next, and whether the buffs that you've earned in the previous day or the money that you've earned, or, what is the linking factor that makes this story arc.
In my head, it would be really compelling to see this thing play out in maybe a style that looks like Banner Saga, a little bit of that 1980s cartoon animation sort of feel. And what the Bard is doing is really going from tavern to tavern, making various amounts of money. The money is how he's financing a journey, maybe back home, right? Because he's been on this big adventure. He's trying to tell the story and get back to his home. He's a simple person. And depending on how well you do in these stories or how much money you make, that allows you to get to, one pub, two pubs, three pubs closer to home. So, between you and home, there's 50 pubs, there's 100 pubs, whatever it is. And you're sort of financing your way. You're buying your horse rides back to the simple life.
What if this is a Banner Saga-like scenario? There's an army who's fighting a war, essentially, and you are a bard singing about that war. And the more kind of enthusiasm that you're able to inspire in your crowd, kind of like a propaganda video, inspires them to join the cause and to fight alongside these heroes. And you're not really sure whether what you're saying is accurate or not. You get like newspapers or whatever was period appropriate. I don't know, news scrolls every day that gives you like the highlights of the war. But, you can choose to either present the truth and keep the public informed, or to embellish the story and make these warriors seem like real titans, like real gods. And, how does that affect the populace and their public opinion and how much they're going to fight alongside them, and whether or not that ultimately ends in them winning or losing the war?
One of the things you could do is maybe after every pub you beat and you go on your horse ride to the next location, you're getting these ravens or scrolls, whatever they are, in different publications. And maybe what you can do, right, is find one or two ideas or pieces of inspiration from each of those documents that you're kind of allowed to take with you, or highlight or remember in some way that you can incorporate into the next song. And that's kind of the way you handle unlocking new abilities. You're kind of learning new pieces of fiction to tell your audience.
That's very cool. Anyways, we've already, I feel like we're just getting into it, but we've already hit that time limit on this one. So we have to conclude this and give it a name.
A Bard's Tale is taken.
I know, that's perfect, right? I'm going to suggest a song for a meal, like somebody would have on a sign, or somebody would walk into a bar and loudly announce, I have a song that I will exchange for a meal.
I like it.
All right. Anyways, that was again provided to us from Alex Goodhand, a new listener who had just listened to one episode before and is already coming in swinging. Alex, that was wonderful. We would love to hear from you again, and we hope that we hear from a lot of new listeners, as we have gotten a lot of new listeners recently, judging by our numbers. It's really wonderful. We're seeing a little bit of an uptick there. So, new voices is good for everybody. It means that there's more diversity of experiences kind of contributing to the pitches that we receive. It means a wider variety of video game ideas coming from a totally different set of perspectives, which is wonderful, amazing. We're very happy about that. And if you would like to contribute to that, then you can again tweet us at PlaywrightCast. You can email us playwrightcast@gmail.com, or you can go to our website, playwrightcast.com/pitch. That is PLAYWRITECAST.
Tom, thank you so much for being here. I mean, plug away. I'm sure, we can't help you as much as IGN can. But yeah, your work is so wonderful, and I'm such a fan. So to have you, and such a fun idea. I love Diablo. To tell us where we can find you.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure being here. And I basically, the only place you can find me that's worth it is Twitter at Tom R. Marks, MARKS. Yeah, I'm pretty active there, and I don't have any other sort of social media or self-promotion, so...
Tom, you keep my Switch so full of good stuff. Hollow Knight, Celeste was wonderful. I'm actually one of the people that put on some of that slow-mo and assist stuff on Celeste, which I actually think is wonderful that they included some of that stuff, because, I don't know, at some point I was like, okay, this is a little too tough, and I'm so interested in what it's trying to say.
Definitely.
And no shame in that. The game, that's one of the great things about that game, is no shame at all, right? Like, it doesn't discourage you from doing that. It doesn't make you feel bad about doing that. It just wants you to enjoy it the way you want to enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other hand, I'm enjoying getting my butt kicked by Hollow Knight.
Yeah, Hollow Knight doesn't care what you want.
Yeah, that's right. Hollow Knight's way more interested in itself. Hey, special thank you to PROTODOME for the use of our theme song, Hello World. It's off the album Blue Noise. It's very good chiptune music. Go give it a listen.
I would also suggest Famifood is my favorite of PROTODOME's albums.
Famifood
has also contributed to his fair share of actual video game soundtracks. Always appreciated to play in and play out our episodes.
So H, you got away easy this week. I pitched, Tom pitched. Are you going to leave us with our mini pitch for people to have their appetites wet?
Absolutely. So my miniature pitch for the day, just to leave you all with something interesting to think about while we go out into the world, is a fighting game where you have to pick individual parts of the body to control and see which one comes out ahead. I mean, obviously the head comes out ahead, but I mean, which one wins the battles? So it's the toe versus the uvula in the battle of the century.
All my money's on pituitary.
Well, we'll see you next week.
Bye.
So long.